something tonight, Father. Apply it, hide it in our hearts, Lord, and apply it to our lives. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Hope everybody's had a good week so far. It's a busy week. At the end, we'll finish up the events we have for the week. So I'll make that announcement. Let's open our Bible, Genesis, chapter number 21. We're almost halfway through this book. 5 more chapters will be halfway through this book. So, but we've had a lot going on so far here, haven't we? We've had a lot of deception, a lot of a bunch of different stuff going on. Abraham, who told everybody about his wife being her sister for twice now, and almost had her taken by some other man 2 times. Last week we talked about God personally stepped in and told Abimelech, "Don't you touch her, or you're going to die in your house." So we're kind of picking up here where we left off. So verse number 1, chapter 21, verse number 1. And the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did unto Sarah as he had spoken. So what does it mean by the Lord had did unto Sarah as he had spoken?
He told her about it. He told her she was going to have a baby.
Yeah. That she was going to conceive. Right? If we go back to chapter 18 and verse 10, it says, talking about the angels that are getting before they go into Sodom. But the men put forth their hand and 18, not 19, verse 10. Sorry, it's the Lord talking. And he said, I will certainly return unto thee according to the time of life. And lo, Sarah thy wife shall have a son. And Sarah heard it in the 10th door, which God has when Sarah laughed. But the Lord said, I will return to her time of life. In other words, I will make it possible for her to have a baby again because she's really old. So at this point. So we see that's what's taking place. The Lord, and notice the Lord, he didn't just speak it. He didn't just snap his fingers or even will it. He went and visited Sarah and then returned to her that time of life. You can almost read it. You can almost say, is this another virgin birth? But it's not. And if we go back and read it, he's returning to her the ability to have a child at this point. So number 1 on your worksheet, we see God open the womb of Sarah. He had visited her as he had promised. And I don't know why I put a question mark at the end of that. It's supposed to be a period on there. But verse 2 and 3. For Sarah conceived and bare Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him. And Abraham called the name of his son that was born unto him, whom Sarah bare to him, Isaac. So we see a couple things here. Number 1 is that Sarah conceived, she bare Abraham a son. Because back then the children were basically known by their fathers. You know, they had their father's name on her. And it said, bare Abraham a son in his old age. And I like this part, at the set time of which God has spoken to him. We talk about doing things in God's timing, right? Waiting on the Lord. When he provides that timing, everything works out the way it's supposed to. When we get ahead, remember Sarah tried to get ahead of God, right? How'd she get ahead of God? Told Abraham, take my handmaid Hagar, have a baby with her. She tried to help out God because all she could see was that she wasn't going to be able to have a baby at her. She was getting older, so she tried to help out God. So God did what he promised. He fulfilled that promise. And then Abraham called the name of the son Isaac. Does anybody remember what the name of his other son was by Hagar?
Ishmael.
Ishmael, right? And Ishmael was the father of the Ishmaelites. And we're going to see we're going to see what takes place with Hagar and Ishmael here in just a few minutes. Yeah.
What does Isaac mean?
Isaac means
Laughter.
Yeah, I think
Laughter.
so.
Yes.
Son of laughter.
Son of laughter.
Because.
They
Sarah
laughed.
Yeah.
So who got the joke pulled on?
Yeah, right.
It was interesting how they named children after moods or sort of traits that they did. Something like that. It was interesting how they did that. Verse number 4. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Now Abraham was not 8 days old. It was Isaac who was 8 days old. So, you can laugh a little bit. Praise the Lord. Right? And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac, being 8 days old, as God had commanded him. And Abraham was, look at this, 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. Could you imagine as a father, even as a parent, being 100 years old and having a baby born unto you? I'd be like, man, it's interesting to do that. So we see verse number 3 in your worksheet, Abraham circumcised the boy at 8 days old. He was 100 when Isaac was born unto him. Abraham was, Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. So now we're going to read verse 6. And Sarah said, God hath made me to laugh, so that all that hear will laugh with me. So what's Sarah saying here?
She knows what Isaac means.
She knows what Isaac
Well,
means,
they had a
okay?
good laugh about the fact she was 90 years old and had a baby.
Yeah. So, see, and this point right here is very, I want you to keep in mind as we go a few verses down the road. Sarah was saying, hey, man, God, how funny is it that God let me have a baby? It's something we can talk about later, right? One of those stories you can remember. They can have a good laugh about the story. Because Sarah was like, I'm an old lady and I'm having a baby. How funny is that? She wanted people to laugh with her.
Steve just pointed out that they laughed with her and not at her.
That's true. They did laugh with her. So, and that's going to be important to understand in just a couple of verses. So Sarah was kind of liking the fact she could make a joke of it with the people, showing what God did, but kind of, sometimes when God does something, we sit back and laugh, and man, we never would have thought that happened, And that's kind of what Sarah's like, hey, these folks can laugh at me, we can have a good laugh, being old and having that baby. Verse 7.
Wait a minute, Pastor Chris.
Oh, yeah.
I thought they lived to be how old was
Prior to the flood, a lot of them lived to be 600, 700, 800 years old. After the flood, the age of people started decreasing.
I'm just saying maybe the 100 back then was like our 40 or 50.
Yeah,
You're saying that.
yeah, right, because they were all born after Noah's generation was. So yeah. So verse 7. And she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah should have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. She's like, who would have ever said that me, being as old as I am, would have a child and be able to feed that child? I said nobody would ever said that because just the age restriction. It would be like my mom telling me, hey, your dad and I are getting ready to have a baby. I'd be like, yeah. They're in their mid-70s and it's just not probable it's going to happen.
Didn't they have ailments? Being that age?
They had
our age. Ailments.
Did they have what?
Ailments.
Oh, ailments, yeah.
We're crippled at our age.
Yes, we are.
God limited it, he said 120 years after the flood. But because of the change in the atmosphere, that's why they decreased in age. But there was still enough oxygen in the atmosphere, because the earth is in a constant state of decay, that they had enough to be able to live beyond that, I think.
Right?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay.
Back up to verse 4,
Okay.
where it says Abraham circumcised his son
Yes.
at 8 days old.
Yes.
Was Abraham Jewish?
Yeah, he's the
Yeah.
beginning.
You guys might have been out for the one chapter we talked about where God gave Abraham and his household an everlasting covenant. Okay, in other words, he was going to be their God; they were going to be his people. We're part of that covenant, right? But the thing was, the circumcision was a token of that covenant. So in other words, everybody that was basically on God's side, everybody that was in the family of God had to be circumcised. Abraham went through a circumcised. It's the same circumcision that we know of today. It's the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
He also brought up that they circumcised them on the 8th day because the level of vitamin K in their system caused them to clot more effectively. If they did it before that, that's why they give vitamin K injections to newborns.
Mhm.
Because they'll bleed, they don't have enough of because they've been fed off the placenta and everything.
Mhm.
But yeah, so the vitamin K level was high enough that they would actually clot.
So
Fight.
Yeah.
So Mary, it was basically in the Old Testament, those that were circumcised were children of God, those that were not were the enemies of God, for the most part. All right, anybody that was part of the camp of the children of God had to be circumcised. Anybody that was part of Abraham's camp and his group had to be circumcised. So that's why he circumcised Isaac at 8 days old. So verse 6 again, and verse 7, sorry, and she said, who would have said unto Abraham that Sarah would have given children suck? For I have borne him a son in his old age. And the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. So we see that Sarah had a story to tell that no one would have believed had they told it before. And then, of course, we see here in verse 8, the child grew, so some time went by, and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. I'm assuming that the weaned there means he was no longer need to be fed from his mother.
No more nursing.
No more nursing, yeah, no more
They,
needing.
they nursed until they were like 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
They would nurse them until then.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
Well, actually, today's way of putting it, it's easier to say that nurse till 48 months.
Holy
So, you know.
I see the kid nursing it too, and I'm going, what's wrong with her?
No doubt.
They
So,
start getting teeth. You know?
never know.
verse 9.
I didn't say it. You did.
Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
What you doing over there, Les?
Oh, I said maybe Abraham must have done some mean love of her too.
All right. All right. Verse 9. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had born unto Abraham, mocking. Now the reason why I said because I didn't when I first initially thought about it, I didn't realize that I didn't pay attention to the fact there was some time had gone by. But when I first read it, and that's why I said we had to remember, it was almost like that Ishmael was kind of making fun of Sarah having the baby at a young age or old age stuff, but she was just having a laugh, but she didn't want Ishmael to be able to have fun with that either, But it says Ishmael was mocking. We don't know what he was mocking. But it says, and the child grew, verse 9, and Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had born unto Abraham, mocking. Verse 10, wherefore she said unto Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. Now, some things we got to remember here. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, she's giving advice to Abraham again. The reason why he's in that mess is because she gave advice to him the first time.
Yeah. I would say, in all honesty, the one that's actually being treated unfairly in all this is Hagar.
Right.
Because she was brought to Abraham by Sarah.
Right.
Sarah was trying to help out God. Then she got pregnant, and Sarah got jealous because she got pregnant. And then Sarah built a resistance toward her and hated her. Now her son's mocking. Now she's going to Abraham and said, get rid of this bondwoman and her son, not saying Abraham's son, because Ishmael's still the son of Abraham.
Right.
Yes.
So the thing is that when Isaac, they went through that period of time, Ishmael had already been the established son of Abraham for how many years?
Right.
Probably like 10, 12 years maybe.
Yeah, there's some time going
And
on.
so, he was the only child for that whole time, and then all of a sudden this new little baby comes along, there was, since he was the son of the promise, it was,
And I'm sure Abraham loved Ishmael. Ishmael's his son. I'm sure he loved him.
You know what's deep about this? It's not the first son, it's always the second son.
Yeah,
It wasn't Cain, it was Abel.
that's true. And it was not Esau, it was Jacob.
Bingo.
As you go through, yeah. Interesting point. I'll keep that in mind as we go through this. So that's kind of cool. So now Sarah's going to Abraham and telling Abraham, look, get rid of this bondwoman, get rid of her son, because he's mocking, and he shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. Now you notice she didn't acknowledge the fact that again, that Abraham was the father of both of the children. She wanted him gone. Verse 11. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. See, Abraham was heartbroken with this because Sarah hated his other son, who, by the way, would not have been there actually had Sarah not pushed it. And so, but still Abraham loved him. So number 5 in your worksheet, Ishmael was mocking Sarah and got him and his mom kicked out. So she's telling Abraham right now, and Abraham agreed. He doesn't know what to do. So you know what he should say. He should say, "Look, I'll stand upon my watch and set me upon the tower and watch to see what he'll say to me." Right? They go back in 2:1, so we don't know what's going on. He
should have been standing on his watch to start with.
He should have stood.
He took the advice of his wife.
Absolutely.
Now she's.
Yep.
Now she's going back on him what she said.
Yeah.
And if he did what he was supposed to do, God told him to obey, because he was gonna have a child, but he took his advice of his wife.
Yep.
Now they got in a mess.
Sounds like Adam.
Yep. True.
He's
So,
responsible. He's responsible.
so the point is that don't listen to wives, right?
I
Yeah.
was thinking Sheldon Creek for that to come out. Saying it here.
It just shows you that when you're outside the will of God, there are a lot of other people into the whole situation.
Yep. Verse number 12. So let's see. So Abraham, of course, one thing I like about Abraham, he always goes to God. On almost everything. Everywhere he goes, he worships. He talks to God a lot. You know, Bible said a couple chapters back, right? When he goes to the place, the appointed place that he meets with God at. So verse 12, and God said unto Abraham, let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman, and all that Sarah hath said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac shall thy seed be called. So if we just stop right here, God's telling Abraham, look, go ahead and do what your wife asks. Get rid of the bondwoman, get rid of Isaac. He said, but don't, don't fear, don't be grievous over it. He said, because the promised seed was through Sarah, through the son between him and Sarah, and which is now Isaac. That was the promised seed. But that doesn't mean that God leaves Isaac or Ishmael high and dry. So verse 13, and also of the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. So what's that saying here when it says he'll make a nation of Ishmael? Ishmael, yes.
He becomes the Arab nation.
Yeah.
He sets him up, gives him the same, he gives him 12 princes, just like Isaac, and Jacob.
So does anybody remember why Ishmael gets to become a nation just like Israel?
Because he's part of Abraham's seed.
part of Abraham's seed,
And
right?
that's the covenant that the Lord made with him.
Yep.
It wasn't originally supposed to be him,
Right.
but
So see, Ishmael's the seed out of God's will, whereas Isaac's the seed in God's will. You know, the blessed seed. Yes, sir.
Apostle Paul talks about that in Galatians, about the new covenants, the Old Testament,
Yeah.
New Testament, likens them to Isaac and
Yeah.
Ishmael.
Yep. So, Numbers 6 in your worksheet, verse 12. God said, do as Sarah asked, because the seed was promised to her son, not to the bondwoman's son. Verse 13, number 7. Ishmael would also be a nation, as Abraham's seed was promised to be innumerable. However, he was not the promised seed. He was still a seed from Abraham, so it was going to grow. It was going to be, the Bible says you can't number it. You know, it's innumerable. And the son from Abraham and Sarah was the blessed one, which is now Ishmael. Isaac. Verse 14. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and took bread and a bottle of water and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder, and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. So Abraham got up, he walked her out to the edge, gave her some food and drink and kid. So come on, he almost like took
Jack.
Now, you know, that's got to be a scary situation for a mother, especially a single mom, you know, going out there, you got no way to provide yourself, going out in the wilderness, so it's not like there's a Walmart right around the corner, no social services out there or anything like that, you know, just out there with some bread and water. Right. She didn't even pray. Well, she was Egyptian, so she wouldn't have prayed to God. She would have prayed to the idols. Yes, sir.
How many guys do that today? They just abandon the woman they had a child with, and then, that's it.
Yeah.
That happens a lot.
It does. It does. So let's see what happens here. Verse 15. And the water was spent in the bottle, and she cast the child under one of the shrubs. So her water ran out. Why would Hagar put Ishmael underneath a shrub? Hot, keep shade, right?
Yeah.
Doing what a mother does, trying to protect her son.
Yeah.
Verse 15. And the water, verse 16. And she went and sat her down over against him a good way off, as it were a bow shot. For she said, let me not see the death of the child. and she sat over against him and lifted up her voice and wept. So we see here that Hagar thought her baby was going to die, stuck him under the shrub. She didn't want to actually watch him die, but she was thinking that, and now she's crying out. Okay, boys, as any mother, any parent would do. Any loving parent would do the same thing. Yes, ma'am.
It doesn't say that she specifically cried out to God, though. It just
No.
said that she wept.
Right. She just cried. Yeah. Yep. She did not cry out to God. She wept. Because we're going to see something here in the next verse or so. Something I want to point out to you as well. Number 8 in your worksheet, 14 through 16. Hagar was sent into the wilderness, ran out of water, and believed her son was going to die. She wept. All right. Verse 17. And God heard. Now listen to this. Listen to whose voice God heard. And God heard the voice of the lad.
Right.
And the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not, for God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. So basically Hagar is going to be taken care of because of the boy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you know that Abraham raised him up in the faith that he had.
Yeah.
It was his son.
Yep.
And so he had the faith of God, in God, but Hagar was not, she was an Egyptian, so she
Right.
didn't have it.
Right.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Well, Abraham, he was Abraham's seed, and God had
Yes.
made a covenant with Abraham.
Yes.
So,
And Hagar was attached to that seed as being his mother, right? So she was covered. Whatever protections the son would have, she would fall under those protections as well. But it's interesting that God heard his cry
right.
and not hers.
And that's the reason why.
Yep, and that is, it's like the question that was asked last week or so about why did God spare Lot from Sodom and Gomorrah? Because of Abraham, right? The Bible says Abraham, basically went to God on behalf of Lot, and that's why Lot was spared the city. That's why he wasn't destroyed, because of Abraham. And so there's kind of the same similarity here. But I thought that was interesting here, that God heard the voice of the lad. So number 9 in your worksheet. Notice God heard the voice of the boy, not Hagar, who was weeping. God's promise was for him to be a nation and Abraham's seed to prosper, either good or bad. Because basically Abraham has two seeds. He has a good one, the one's going to be a good one, which we're part of, and he got the bad one, which other people are not part of. So, verse number 18. Arise. Now this should still be the angel now talking to Hagar. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. Actually, this was God talking. God said, I will make him a great nation. And God, what did he do? He opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And she went and filled the bottle with water and gave the lad drink. So God took care of her. He opened her eyes. She saw this well out there, had plenty of water in it. She filled her bottle. Now, God opening her eyes, they didn't say that God built that. The well was built all of a sudden, and so the well was there. But it might have been one of the mirage things, where you get heat. Maybe she couldn't see clearly or whatever it was at the time. But God, either way, cleared up her vision, her thought process. Now He opened her eyes so she could see. Yes, sir.
Might have been
Kind of reminds me of the two disciples who were on the road to Emmaus, and it wasn't until the breaking of bread that their eyes were opened.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times in our lives where we'll be going along and all of a sudden we'll see something we've never seen before, but it's been there all the time.
Yeah. On that road to Emmaus, that's where the two men were talking to Jesus about Jesus, not knowing He was Jesus they were talking to. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Yes, sir.
It's kind of interesting knowing that God heard the cries of the lad.
Yeah.
He hears our cry when we cry out to God.
Amen.
It also says an angel of God.
Yeah.
An angel of God.
Yep.
Sometimes Jesus is spoken of as the
Angel of God. Yeah.
I wonder if you could put Jesus in there, man.
Interesting.
I mean,
It's a good thought. Good thought. Interesting.
I know it says angel.
Yeah, but no. And the angel of God also appeared to Abraham about sparing Sodom, right? Where Abraham, right at that time before. Remember, there's 3 angels. One was the angel of God. The other 2 went to the city.
Yeah.
So it could be that same angel. The same angel talking to both. Just a little bit later on down the road here. Verse number 20. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness, and became an archer. So God had His hand of protection on Ishmael. Hagar received the blessings of that protection because she was Ishmael's mother. And so, and he grew and he became an archer. Everybody know what an archer is?
Bow and arrow.
Bow and arrow.
I was gonna bet when she separated herself from him,
Survivor.
it says that she went about a bow shot away.
Yeah.
So that he must have been familiar with archery to some degree.
That's true.
what he
Because
became.
I didn't catch it, but that's true. When she put Ishmael under the shade of the tree, she went a bow shot away and cried for him, and now he's an archer. So interesting how that is. You put those similarities in there. So God was with him, and he became an archer.
He wanted to get some food.
Oh yeah. So verse 21. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So now she was Egyptian. Of course, Egyptians are all about themselves, all about their idol gods. Well, the children of Israel were bondage to Egypt for 40 years or 400 years. And so before Moses came, he had a great exodus out there, which we'll get into. Genesis ends before that bondage starts, but it builds up the path to it. So now Hagar went and got Ishmael a wife, an Egyptian wife. And how they got their wives back then is nothing like what we do now. They had no dating sites where you fill out for it. You wanted, hey, you available to get married? Come on, let's go. I mean, there had to be consent on the girl's part too, but they were raised that way. That was their culture, raised to get married. Yes.
There was financial transactions that went on.
Oh yeah,
The
yeah.
bride price and the dowry and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So they tried to marry up.
Absolutely. Probably the fathers were probably happy when they had daughters. They got $3, man. I can get this amount for this one, this one. Just kidding.
But if they don't marry, you got to take care of them. So.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, if anything like Eve, they'll each had a house at home, right? Come on, we can laugh. That was fun. Come on, we can have fun in church. Praise the Lord. We probably just lost a few of our viewers. Anyway, it happens. And they dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, verse 21. His mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. Number 10 on your worksheet. 18 to 21. They were saved. Ishmael grew and had a wife from Egypt. Notice also that God took care of Hagar, who was with Ishmael. So, again, she gets into that blessing. It's almost like if you're following somebody, or take an employer, for example. An employer has a Christian person working for him. And that employer, even that employer's lost, that Christian worker does a great job. That employer is going to reap the benefits, reap some of the blessings from that Christian employee because God's blessing that employee and it carries over. Yes, sir.
It's kind of like Joseph in Potiphar's house.
Exactly.
Prospered everything he had.
Yep. Everything Joseph touched got prospered, and all the kings and all that are prospered from it, right? Just like Hagar, they were part of that blessing, yes.
It's interesting that she took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. I bet she was pretty tiffed that she had got kicked out of the house and was left with her son to die. So
Yeah.
she's like, I'm not going to marry him off to one of those Israelites. I'm getting her an Egyptian.
Probably, she probably went to the local independent church here and said, hey, people treat me like that, I'm going to go somewhere else. Some of y'all will catch us.
Yeah.
It's a joke. That's an old
Yeah.
Hey, but we want a lot of us will see that.
Yeah.
So on your worksheet, we already did number 10, sorry, verse 22. And it came to pass that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spoke unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Huh?
You said fecal. Fecal, I think it is.
Michael. Anyway, so who's Abimelech? Anybody remember who Abimelech is?
He was the one that was going to marry Sarah and said, you're dead man.
Yeah, he was the second king that Abraham told Sarah, tell me you're my sister because I don't want to kill me. And he almost ran, and remember, God visited him personally in this dream. And the other one, he just put plagues on him. But God said, you touch her, I'm going to kill you and your family. So now Abimelech and Abraham are meeting again. So you gotta figure that Abimelech's probably kind of on guard a little bit here. I'm going to watch what I'm going to say with Abraham because Abimelech knows that he's got the hand of God on him.
Right.
So verse 21 or 22 again, it came to pass that time that Abimelech and Phicol, the chief captain of his host, spake unto Abraham, saying, God is with thee in all that thou doest. Now therefore, Abimelech's still talking. Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land where thou hast sojourned. So Abimelech's taking Abraham and saying, look, buddy, I treat you nicely. I want you to promise that you're not going to put bad curses on me or my family. You're going to treat us the same way you treat him. You know, he's scared. He's not just, he knows that he's not the best of Abraham, so he wants to be in Abraham's good blessings. Verse 24, and Abraham said, I will swear. In other words, because remember, what was it that because the wounds of Abimelech's household were all closed up, right? Remember, weren't able to have babies, and the only way it was going to get restored was for Abraham to pray for him. Remember, that's what we talked about. I think last week we discussed that. So verse 24, and Abraham said, I will swear. Number 11 on your worksheet, Abimelech, I put king of Gerar, chapter 20, verse 3, you'll see that, was not wanting to upset Abraham and made him promise not to unjustly deal with him. So in other words, Abimelech's like, you know, man, I've been nice to you, I treated you fairly. All I ask is the same thing in return. And verse 25. And Abraham reproved Abimelech because of a well of water, and Abimelech's servant had violently taken away. So they just made this covenant, and now there's a problem over a well. So I notice that Abraham reproved Abimelech. So Abraham somewhere, there's a little time gone by, but Abraham somewhere went back to Abimelech and started getting on to him. Hey man, let's talk about this well for a minute. I can imagine that Abimelech is going to be extremely concerned for himself during this time as well as his family, because he knows that all Abraham's got to do is pray. You know, and go from there. So let's see what happens. Number 12 in your worksheet, Abraham's men dug the well, Abimelech took it, Abraham was not happy. So when it's talking about this well, we'll see in just a few more verses down, but basically Abraham and his men dug this well, and men of Abimelech, or Abimelech's men, with or without Abimelech's knowledge is irrelevant. They came by force and they took over this well because it was producing a lot of water, so they took control of it. And now Abraham is not happy about it. He goes to the king. So, verse 20, verse 26. And Abimelech said, I wot not who hath done this thing, neither didst thou tell me, neither yet heard I of it, but today. So in other words, Abimelech's like, wait a minute, I didn't know nothing about this. You know, he's so saying, look, nobody said anything to me about this. I didn't know this. You know, this is all news to me. So and Abimelech's probably telling the truth here. He probably didn't know anything about it. Yes.
Well, having a well back then, especially in that area, that was a valuable thing.
Oh yeah.
They were hard to build. You ever see a picture of Jacob's well over there in the Middle
Big,
East?
huge hole.
Thing's 80 feet deep,
Wow.
and it's got these stairs going all the way around it, so you could go down to the bottom, fill up your jug, and then walk all the way back up.
Wow.
Kind of like a spiral staircase thing outside.
Crazy.
Wow.
And no handrails.
You know, and that water's it's a source of life, right? You gotta have the water.
And it's scarce over there too.
Yeah, because they're in the wilderness, right? A lot of them are. So there's this argument over it as well. And verse 26, you know, Abimelech's like, look, man, I knew nothing of it. Verse 27, number 13, your worksheet, and we'll go there. Abimelech had not heard of this thing until this movement, or until this moment. Sorry, not movement, moment. Verse 27, and Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them unto Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. You know, when I first started studying this one verse at a time, I was like, what in the world? If Abraham was upset with Abimelech, why would he give him sheep and make a covenant with him? Well, we're going to see as we go through this. So, get a couple more verses down. Verse 22, or 28. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, here's the answer, for these ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me, that I have digged this well. In other words, Abraham said, look, I'm going to give you some of my best stuff to prove to you that I've done this well. You know why? Because Abraham's giving of what he's got, so some good stuff of what he's got to Abimelech, and Abimelech's like, what's the purpose of this? Because I want you to know I'm telling you the truth. I'm willing to give you my good stuff here, my baby lambs. Because they were valuable also. So that way you know that I've done good well. My guy's done it. Because at the end of the day, Abimelech's still the king, right? Even though Abraham's got the power of God, Abimelech's the king in the town, in the city. So, so verse 30 said, "For these 7 new lambs thou shalt take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me, that I have done this well." Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because they swear, both of them. So they both made the covenant. They both agreed to it. Abraham gave him some of the ewe lambs to kind of prove that he was telling the truth, to prove that he really did that well. Verse 32. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech rose up, and Phicol, the chief captain of the host, and they returned into the land of the Philistines. So it looks like, it actually looks like maybe the king came to see Abraham. Well, because the king is now leaving, Abimelech's now leaving, taking his man leaving. Verse 33. And Abraham planted a grove in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. Now, you have to ask, we know that Abraham wasn't there long. It's not like he settled there. He just dwelled in the land many days. So he was there for a relatively short amount of time. But so I was wondering why he planted a grove. I think he did that kind of an honor to the Lord, an honor of the covenant, what the Lord's done with him. Because everywhere Abraham went, what did he do? He built an altar and he worshiped the Lord. Right? So here I think he kind of built a grove, maybe as a remembrance, maybe it's something nice for the Lord, a way to honor the Lord. But he built this grove, and they're called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned in the Philistines' land many days. So it wasn't long that he was there, but he was there, yes.
Now, isn't the Philistines' land, isn't that the land of Canaan? Weren't the Philistines in
I
Canaan?
believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe so. Find out. Let's see, Philistines' land. Paul, you looking up something?
I think that
Yeah. The covenant between Abimelech and Abraham
Yeah.
is rehearsed by David in 2 Samuel 24:24.
Okay.
And that rehearsing is, the king said unto Moriah, "Nay, but I will surely buy it from thee at a price. Neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which doth not cost me nothing."
Yeah.
So it's no different. You apply that to somebody who wants to be a pastor, but he's a novice.
Right.
You have to know, what is it that you use? You use a term about if there's no sacrifice, there's no crown.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Cheating the crown.
Cheating the crown. Yeah. And that's embedded in Abraham.
Yeah.
And it's embedded into the Word of God. And David read the Word of God, and it comes out in David.
Yeah.
And it's in other places too, because how does Christ get his church? He sacrifices himself.
Yeah.
So there's these interlocking little secrets,
Oh, yeah.
nuggets.
There is. Number 15 in your worksheet, 33 through 34. Abraham planted a grove, most likely in honor to the Lord, as he always worshiped God everywhere he went. Like I said, that's one thing I really respect Abraham for. Is Abraham always remembered to bring God into everything, and everywhere he went, every land he went to, he remembered to bring God into it. We can often in our lives do things, get so sidetracked, sometimes we forget to bring God into our situations.
Yeah.
And then when it's at the end, we're like, uh-oh. Michelle and I, when we found out we were getting a house, we got down on our knees and we thank God, we dedicated the house to Him, dedicated it for ministry, for use, whatever it is. We're very grateful for it. But there was times in the past where we didn't do that stuff, and not that we didn't love the Lord or anything, we just didn't come to our remembrance right away.
You're more spiritual.
And,
You're more spiritual.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. But so Abraham brought the Lord into it. Well, we got a few more minutes. I was thinking this would take a little bit longer, but we'll start with the next chapter a little bit. You have to understand between the end of verse 34 and the beginning of chapter 22, verse 1, there's a little time goes by. All right? And you have to understand Abraham's love for his children. He was heartbroken when Ishmael was gone. Or when Ishmael had to leave. Remember the Bible said he was troubled, he went to God, and he loved Isaac just the same. I say that to say, because that's going to be important building up chapter 22 here. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. So when it says God tempted Abraham, God was going to test Abraham to see if Abraham loved God more than he loved his son. He loved the son more than he loved God. Yes.
I didn't think that God tempted people.
He doesn't tempt them with evil. The Bible says God doesn't tempt people with evil, but his tempting is a testing here.
Okay.
You know, tempting is going to be a testing.
You look at the permissive will of God.
Yeah.
There's no temptation taking you, but such as is common to man.
Right.
So there's a trial area there that, you know, you can look at this as a bone that you could choke on and just throw the whole book out. Or else you get it's a bone you can look at and say, oh, well, okay, Lord, I can't swallow that, but give me something else.
Yeah. But the tempting is also a lot like a testing, a trial, to see if he's going to follow through with it. But James tells us that God does not tempt man with evil, doesn't tempt man, you know, with the things that are bad. So God's talking to Abraham, and God said, I said to him, Abraham, and Abraham said, Behold, here I am. Verse 2, and he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest. So God saw the love that Abraham had for Isaac, and that's the love that he's testing. Yes, sir.
Hebrews chapter 11, verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tried.
Yeah. Tried when he was tempted. Yep. Absolutely. So God says, Look, take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I tell thee. So God says, you take your son, and you go up that altar, and you make him the sacrifice. How many of us prepared for the stop right there?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You wonder if maybe it got to the point where Abraham kind of idolized Isaac
Could have been.
because he had lost the one son and they had one left, and maybe he became kind of more like an idol, trying to make sure that.
Well, you know, God uses the same words almost that he does with Jesus. Not exactly, but almost. Jesus, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, you know, whom I love. And he tells Abraham, this is your only son, whom thou lovest. So God's showing the kind of love that Abraham had for Isaac. And to your point, he might have loved him more, where maybe God's like, well, let's really test Abraham's heart. Let's see if he's going to sacrifice his son for me, or see if he's going to not sacrifice his son and disobey me. You know, so it's tough.
Wasn't Abraham after God's own heart?
It was.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
So he's a similitude.
Yeah.
He's a total similitude. This word here, Moriah. Does anybody know what that means?
Isn't that a place of it's like Golgotha, right? It's the same mountain that Christ was sacrificed on?
Well, the word means God is my instructor.
So, part of the dedication, you know, a lot of times when our babies are born, and children are born, and we dedicate them unto the Lord. We do it. Probably everybody.
Yeah.
We dedicate them to the Lord. It's the Lord's will.
Yep.
Will be done.
Yep.
No matter what it is.
Amen.
When it happens, you got to continue to have that faith and believe that His will.
Yep. Amen. Amen. Yes, Steve, you have your hand up?
I'm just saying, maybe that was an instruction on Abraham's part. In order to keep something, you gotta let it go.
Yeah, maybe.
You know?
So, verse 3, again, most all of us would have stopped at the end of verse 2. We'd be like, all right, Lord, I'm not going to sacrifice my son, you know. Verse 3, and Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering and rose up and went unto the place which God had told him. So Abraham got up early, got Isaac up, 2 young men, his donkey, put everything he needed, got the wood all set, and he went unto the place God told him. Then on the 3rd day, so they're in this journey 3 days, on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. You know, I can imagine Abraham contemplating this in his mind. Abraham might even be walking slow to try to delay this. You know, he's obeying, but he's, you know, it's his son you're talking about. We know, and also too, from the human mind, what kind of a loving God would tell you to sacrifice your child, you know?
God Himself.
Huh?
Not himself.
Yeah, right, but I'm saying that the human mind has trouble comprehending that.
I mean, this is an example, him doing this, taking his son to the cross. Jesus,
Oh, yeah.
Jesus bore that cross like he's born that cross.
No, that's true.
Carrying him.
That's very true.
He didn't take it with it,
No,
not on the way there, but
no, yes, sir.
maybe he didn't take it.
No, it said that he believed God when he was counted that he would raise him up from the dead.
Yeah,
I forget which one of the epistles talks about it. Hebrews or something, where Abraham knew that God would fulfill his promise that he'd have seed the stars like the stars of heaven. So
Right.
he believed that he'd raise him up from the dead.
Yep.
Yeah, what's the boy thinking?
I don't know what the boy was saying.
He was obedient. He was obedient.
well,
He
yeah,
laid down
well, we'll hear from the boy in just a moment, yes, sir.
Now, this is Moriah. It says, "You take Isaac whom thou lovest and get thee to Mount Moriah." Now, this Moriah is in 2 Chronicles 3:1. Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah,
Yeah, Mariah
The
was
same-
city, yeah.
place that Isaac was going to be
That's
sacrificed.
cool.
It said, I looked it up and it said that Moriah and Calvary, it says, according to many scholars, Golgotha and the site of Mount Moriah may be the same area. It was outside of the city of Jerusalem, so.
Well, two Pauls, using the word Paul uses similitude, it's kind of got the same similitudes of God with Jesus Christ, right? Sacrifice
Exactly.
the Son.
I don't.
Yep. So we'll go a couple more verses down, and then we'll leave it right there at that point. Verse 4. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again unto you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. So now Isaac has the wood, he's carrying it. Abraham has the fire and the knife, and they're walking up. Does it say anything about a rope here? No. It didn't.
No.
You see how old he was?
Huh?
Sherry was wondering, how old do you think he is? He's a young.
He's carrying wood.
he's
I
a
said
young
probably
lad. He's a
teenager.
young lad.
Yeah.
Probably a teenager.
Strong. Yeah.
Something in that area. Verse 7. Isaac, so now 3 days into this thing, they're walking up the mountain. Now Isaac says something. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? So 3 days into this on his journey, Isaac's finally paying attention and be like, look, man, he's carrying it up here saying, we got the wood, we got the fire, we got the knife, we ain't got the sacrifice. Where's the lamb we're killing?
I'm looking at
Maybe Abraham had a mirror in his pocket and just held it up. It's right here, son. Look in there. Who knows, right? Praise the Lord.
You are so.
He must have knew there was going to be a sacrifice here.
Well,
He did
yeah.
all this stuff for the sacrifice.
Yeah. And so verse 8, and this is where Abraham's faith comes in. And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both together. So Abraham knew that God was going to provide a lamb along the way, yes.
In the newer versions of the Bible, they say, my son God would provide for himself a lamb. But that's not, when you look at it, it says he will provide himself.
Oh, yeah, lamb.
He
for
is
a
the
burnt
lamb.
offering.
He's the Lamb of God,
Yeah.
Jesus
Take
is. So
away the
it's a
sins of the
prophetic
world.
verse.
Yes,
Yeah.
Amen. Verse 9. And they came to the place which God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Now I can't for imagine think that Isaac sat there and was quiet this whole time. I just can't imagine that he would be. Yes.
But when God appointed Abraham to be the person who he was going to give the covenant to, he said, I know that he will guide his household or, have his household in submission to him.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be why God said, okay, go ahead and do this, because he knew that Abraham would make sure that his house was in submission to him.
Could be, could very well be.
He's already got the land.
That he would order his house.
I believe that Isaac, even though very little is talking about him, talked to his father about this. And I believe Abraham said, I believe God's going to raise you up after I kill you.
Maybe.
I mean, you can speculate all you want, but this boy right here, this is not a young child.
No,
This is a young man. And
right,
he's strong enough to put his father down. His father's over 100 years old now.
right, true.
You know, and he could handle his father, but he believed in his father and trusted his father.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ trusted his father to not my will, but thine be done. So there was no battle of the wheels. He willingly trusted what his father said to lay down his life.
Yep. Absolutely. And now, on a funnier note, too, you could also say that Abraham is deceiver like he was, trigger because said, Isaac, what's that? And as he went up and grabbed his arm.
So what I was talking about is in chapter 18 where it says, for I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he had spoken of. So part of that covenant was that he had to command his household well. And so his son, I'm sure that just like Christ laid down willingly on the cross, that
Right.
Isaac laid down willingly.
Yes.
Yes. So he's got Abraham, he's got Isaac all bound up, right? And verse 9, and they came to the place which God told him of, and Abraham built an altar there, and laid the wood in order, and bound Isaac his son, and laid him upon the altar, upon the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took the knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. Now, he took that knife, he had that knife raised up to slay his son. I wonder at what point the angel called out, as he was getting ready to bring it down, or when he lifted up, but you only had moments there. And the angel called out, and Abraham, well, I'm sure was very relieved at that point. Yes.
It's interesting that every time he's addressed, when God addressed him in the first verse, it says, Here am I, or here I am. And then he said when Isaac spoke to him, Here I am. And when the angel spoke to him, he said, Here I am.
Mm-hmm.
So he was, that was his answer to everything that he was told
Right.
to do or he was addressed with.
Yep. Amen.
Here I am.
So we'll end on verse 11. The angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. Now, the angel was up in heaven, so it was a loud voice coming down, but Abraham heard that voice. So, next one, we'll catch up right now. Isaac's still on the altar. Abraham still had the knife up, and now he's talking to the angel. We'll pick up from there next week. All
I
right.
heard another lad. God heard the cry of the other lad. Why wouldn't he hear the cry of Abraham's lad?
Absolutely. A bit of Isaac, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, he could very well have heard the cry of that too as well, and the angel spoke out. So next week we'll find out if he actually ends up killing Isaac or not. But we go here right ahead.
Let's go.
No, he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
So far we're 22 chapters in this book, and there's a lot of drama going on. I'm telling you, man, you can make some world recognized movies out of this book of Genesis here. All the lies and deception. We're going to see. There's a whole lot more scheming coming up. Yes.
It's interesting because every plot and every idea that people have for anything that comes out of Hollywood or any story that's written comes from this book. It's just a basic themes and they just embellish and add details.
It's true.
I was gonna say, I recall seeing a movie regarding this, I just really.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun.
But I mean, they can start a soap opera as Genesis turns. You know, as the world turns to Genesis.
Well, then Brenda would have to do the general.
You folks online,